So, welcome everyone, and happy Pesach, happy Passover, happy Palm Sunday, and the Easter celebrations. Happy spring equinox, happy full moon, and welcome. A couple of things I want to say about logistics, which is that I'd like you to stay muted until I finish talking, and hopefully I'll try to keep it to a half an hour or a little more than a half an hour. That'll include a couple of very short videos, and I have to say I'm not going to be reading what's in the chat. If somebody has like a real urgent question, please like frantically raise your hand or unmute and call it out. But please save your questions, write them down and save them for the question period, which will be hopefully very much a part of this, and I think will add a lot to it. And I'll be happy to stay on after the hour if it looks like the questioning is going to, is going to need that much time. But I'm planning to keep this to an hour and then let it open for a little bit longer. So again, this is a time of celebrations. And I think just to give you a sense of a little bit about where I'm coming from, I do hold that these religious holidays and the holidays that relate to nature celebrate the movement into freedom. And in that sense, there's no freedom without justice. So I want to celebrate with you the progressive movement that we are a part of, the liberal and progressive movement that has freed people from slavery, given Black people of African descent and women and people who don't own property the right to vote and to participate as citizens in this country. The movement that has expanded the ability for people to get health care and hopefully will move us into having free access to health care for everybody. The movement that's created at least a semblance of a safety net for everyone and is moving to increase that. And the movement that is ongoingly waking humanity up to its relationship to the natural world, one of respect and reciprocity for all life. So I deeply, deeply honor the liberal progressive movement in the United States and elsewhere, and feel very much a part of that. It's the lineage of thinkers and activists that include folks like Pete Seeger, Buffy Sainte-Marie, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dorothy Day, Phil Oakes, John Lewis, Howard Zinn, Eleanor Roosevelt, and of course the list could go on and on and on. I'm just naming a tiny little fraction of who we are and who I feel a part of in my heart and in my thinking. And I think there's never been a time when this movement has been more necessary. Never been a time that this movement has been more necessary, and I feel that at its best, this is the movement has its heart in compassion and its mind in a wise and thoughtful understanding of the solutions to the world's problems that have created suffering, and helping to lift people up out of suffering and into creating the beloved community that I think we all aspire to. And part of that movement, and I speak to you as an ally and as a friend. I could say however or but, I don't really mean it that way. It's more of an and. These holidays that we celebrate have, in a way, a deeper, more symbolic, perhaps, meaning, which is that they speak to the liberation and freedom from fixed thoughts, ideologies, attachments to public policy solutions and ideas that are rigid and that cause us to not be able to hear, to listen to other people, other human beings, and they end up creating more suffering and divisions in the world. So it's important for us to look at that in ourselves and to see this as a possible time where we can unleash ourselves from the kind of fixed thinking that makes us unreceptive to other people and unable to learn from them. And maybe in a way, that's a violation of our own principles of inclusivity, compassion, and respect. So along comes Braver Angels. Braver Angels is not a progressive organization. It's not a conservative organization. It's not a moderate political organization. It's not in that game. It has a different orientation. And that orientation, that purpose, that sense of mission is to what they call depolarize individuals and the collective experience, the collective consciousness, you might say, of America to start with. Its purpose is to free us, essentially. And that's where this idea of this holiday time of celebrating freedom, liberation comes in. It's to free us of our own polarizing attitudes. And I want to emphasize that word attitudes, which I'll come back to. But let me give you a little bit of the nuts and bolts of Braver Angels. I'm going to read this from their literature, their own literature. In December of 2016, America had suffered the most divisive election in our history. In this unprecedented moment, co-founders David Blankenhorn, Bill Dougherty, and David Lapp came together with an idea for an unlikely gathering. Blankenhorn is a family therapist who has spent his life, I'm letting people in still, who spent his life focused with couples at the precipice of divorce. With passions still high following the election, we assembled 10 Trump supporters and 11 Clinton supporters in South Lebanon, Ohio. Now, all of you remember 2016, how you felt. They brought together 10 Trump supporters and 11 Clinton supporters in Ohio. This would become the first of what they called the Red-Blue Workshop. The goal was simple. We needed to see if Americans could still disagree respectfully, and just maybe find common ground. Some thought it was not likely. We proved our skeptics wrong. That's from the Braver Angels literature. So red and blue, they had this red and blue workshop. I want to just say something about red and blue because it's really a major issue, a major way that Braver Angels brings about its mission, its focus. I used to actually think I was a red, and so did the FBI. It turned out that some broadcasters covering the election, started casting everyone who voted in the map. You know, you've seen those maps for Democrats as blue, and everyone who voted for Republican is red. And now it's like red and blue, Republican and Democrat. Now I honestly think of myself as green, but again, I'm in the context of what America is, I'm blue. I vote almost 100% Democratic. I tend to defend as much as possible many of the progressive end of the Democratic Party and feel a lot of opposition, strong most of the time, towards the red Republicans. And so I myself have been, I fully confess, a totally polarized political operative. But the dichotomy itself, and this is something I'm really learning from my experience with Braver Angels, the dichotomy itself of red and blue is really false. It's false, it's a fiction, and yet it's real. An analogy that came to me as I was kind of preparing for this is race. Scientists will tell us that there really is no such thing as a Black person and a white person racially. And it's what's called a social fiction. But social fictions become real when they exist in our mind. And so clearly, the idea that there's no Black people and white people is a delusion of people who want to say that they're colorblind. We all have been conditioned to see things in a certain kind of way. And in order to ever get to a place where truly people are related to not by the color of their skin, we have to recognize that right now they are. And it's the same with the red and the blue. Braver Angels is saying, okay, it's true. We're all human beings. We all have a wide variety of thoughts. And yet we're in these camps, most people. I've been, maybe you have, maybe you're not, but most people are. And so the idea of dividing people, it's not really dividing people, it's recognizing that people are divided and then having them learn how to come together, at least in terms of how they feel about each other as human beings. Here is something else from Braver Angels. Braver Angels was inspired by the words of Abraham Lincoln, who not only called on Americans to summon the better angels of our nature, but called on us to find the courage needed to pursue a more perfect union with malice toward none, with charity for all, and with firmness in the right. So they took the better angels and the courage together, and they made it their name, Braver Angels. And they say it's a citizens' movement to reduce political polarization in the US by bringing reds and blues together, to understand each other beyond stereotypes. And that's been the lesson for me in a really big way. As much as I have tried to have myself understand deeply the humanity in people who vote Republican, who supported Trump, who have many of the issues that I think of on the other side, I found myself stereotyping them as a group. And so Braver Angels has really taught me something about that, because I recognize that just as amongst us, just as amongst what the media and the culture has come to call the blue side of the divide, there's a tremendous amount of diversity, even conflict and divisions that are pretty strong. We all know that. There is that on the red side. There's a tremendous amount of diversity of thought, of feeling, of quality of heart and purpose in life. And there's even, contrary to what many progressives continue to try to think, diversity of ethnic groups and diversity of sexual, well, of men and women, and economic status and education. They are not all one kind of person. That has become really clear to me. And it's destructive to our purposes to think of them as all the same. So red and blue, there is two kinds of polarization that Braver Angels defines. One is issue depolarization. Issue depolarization, excuse me, would essentially mean having people that are on different ideological sides or different policy positions compromise in such a way towards a moderate middle. They are not about that. That is not what Braver Angels is seeking to do. Their mission is what they call affective depolarization. And I want to show you a short video, if the technology allows me to do it, of what affective polarization means. Basically, it's to depolarize the affect is to diminish hostile feelings and attitudes and open to a greater possibility of a warm human relationship with a person who disagrees with you on an issue. So again, it's not, so let me do a little, screen share, and I'll show you this really short video about affective polarization. This.
Affective polarization is the degree to which Democrats and Republicans in the United States like or dislike one another. It's measured by the degree to which Democrats and Republicans are willing to marry one another, whether they would be happy or unhappy if their child married someone from the other side, whether or not they're willing to discriminate against the other side or avoid them. In the 1960s, roughly 5% of Americans said they would be unhappy if their child married someone from the other party. Today, that number stands at over 30%. So there's been a five-fold increase in the number of people that would be unhappy if this happened. We know that when people think of themselves as Democrats or Republicans, what they're really thinking about is their social group. The same way as some people might think about their race or their religion or their gender, what they identify with. A long line of social psychology literature says when you do this, you start not thinking about issues, but thinking about feelings, about how I feel towards Democrats if I'm a Republican, or vice versa if I'm a Democrat. At the same time that affective polarization was on the rise, you also saw a dramatic change in the media environment and more opportunities for people to seal themselves off from hearing the other side. One perspective is that the new information environment, the internet, cable TV, outrage radio, has been fueling affective polarization. Another potential route of polarization, and one that I am now exploring in a working paper, is whether the rise of closed elections have exacerbated the problem. What we've seen is an increase in very close elections across the US, elections that are won by 1 percentage point or two, a coin flip election. When elections are very close, competitors feel like they have more to win or lose. So they fight the campaign harder. The campaigns become more toxic. There's more spending. There's more candidate attack ads. They're not attacking candidates on the issues. They're attacking candidates on their character. All this leads to a more toxic information environment, as we call it, which could exacerbate polarization. So what we find is that people who live in districts that became more competitive because of redistricting have become more effectively polarized. And my own belief is that effective polarization is elite driven, that it's caused by politicians and people following politicians. Politicians are the leaders of their group. So when politicians use less vitriolic language, people will stop doing so as well. So in my mind, the solution is different leadership.
Okay, so I'm not sure I agree with his last part of his analysis, but you get the idea of affective depolarization, and it takes a willingness to do that. And what is the willingness? Where does it come from? Why would we look at ourselves and say, okay, I don't like these people because they support President Trump? Well, I really think President Trump is a horrible, horrible person, and anybody that supports him has got to be horrible. And I can honestly say, I felt that way. And the only thing that could change one's opinion about that is to actually encounter a person who supports or voted for Trump and see that they're not like you think they are. They're not, and I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying that many of them. And the ones that come to the Braver Angels workshops who wouldn't come unless they had a willingness to discuss the issues respectfully and follow the protocols and listen to what liberals have to say, have demonstrated to me that they're decent human beings. They're people who have a heart, who love their children, and who would help their neighbor in a crisis and do. I have neighbors who do that, who are Trump supporters, as a matter of fact. And it's a very challenging thing, however, for us to depolarize ourselves. And I think it takes work, like anything. It's like unlearning racism. Well, it's not exactly analogous, but we have, many of us, and I'm not speaking for you, I'm speaking for myself and those of you who resonate with what I'm saying, a condition of reactivity that makes us dislike people because of their ideas. Not because necessarily of their behavior, not because of the way they feel towards other human beings, but because of political positions that they've learned to think are actually what is for the best for humanity and for America. That's what they think. And the fact that they think that doesn't make them a bad person. In fact, I have found that many of them are downright good people. If our feelings about our political adversaries can be represented on a spectrum, I want to show you another thing that comes from Better Angels that's quite valuable. That's this. Here we go. Can you see this? Am I sharing the screen? Yeah. So this is a chart that shows the transformation of affective polarization. Over here, this is where a lot of us start. There are enemies. They want to harm the country. We hate them. If you look at the trajectory here, it goes from here to here. And it goes, this is a little bit less affective polarization, you could say. We think they're ignorant. We think they're deplorable. You know, when Hillary Clinton said that they're deplorable, she meant it. And most of us, many of us, again, believed it. But we thought, oh, she shouldn't say it, you know. But it's the feeling that we're looking at. They've been duped, they're well-meaning, but they're fools. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is that they have this same trajectory. They, the Reds, the Republicans, the Trump supporters, they look at us and they hate us. They look at us and they think we're ignorant. They think we've been duped by the liberal media and we're well-meaning at best. Not at best, but at the middle ground here. They look at us just like we might look at some conservatives and say, well, God, they're just, obviously, they watch Fox News and they're just ignorant, you know. Over to, no, you know what, I'm going to listen and maybe they've got something interesting to say to contribute to the conversation, all the way to this kind of more, you know, they have a lot to contribute. They're 50% of the country. And I find that very interesting, that all over the world, there is this division that's very close to 50%. But that's for another discussion. So you see, I think this is quite valuable. It's something that could be used in any sort of conflict situation. And as progressives, as liberals, we often, when it comes to international relations, when it comes to problem solving, we try to help Americans. Well, in the 50s and 60s, we wanted to get the American population to shift in this way to our view of Russians, to whoever the enemy is. When we're talking about Israel and Palestine, we want the people to be able to change their affect towards the other side in this kind of a way. And what Braver Angels is doing is asking us to look at ourselves and see if that's not a direction we want to move in ourselves. Okay, so let me give you a sense of how they do it, what some of the things that they do are. And a lot of the stuff about Braver Angels, all of the stuff about Braver Angels, you can find at their website, braverangels.org. There's videos, there's writing, there's information about these different workshops. You can just look at that if you want to, just to get a sense of what's going on. You can sign up and participate in something or just observe something. So one of the things they do are what's called skills for bridging the divide. And again, this came out of family therapist work. And so they teach basic communication skills, how to talk in a way that doesn't create hostility, but rather fosters openness. But they do it in a political context, whereas a lot of communication work, like nonviolent communication, is talking about it in terms of classrooms, in terms of families, and so forth. Another workshop is called Depolarizing Within. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. Depolarizing Within. Where within your own like-minded group. So for instance, if you become convinced that polarizing language, polarizing activities, polarizing thinking is actually not helpful to the progressive cause, it's not helpful to humanity, which obviously you care about, or you wouldn't be a liberal and progressive, then when you hear it coming from the organizations that you're involved in, or the individuals that you associate with, what are the skills that you can use to not alienate them, but help maybe shift the dialogue a little bit? And they have whole workshops designed, and I participated in them. I thought it was very helpful. How do I communicate to you, given that I'm now a believer. I've drunk the Braver Angels Kool-Aid, and I really believe that polarization is a huge problem for America and a huge problem for us to achieve our goals. So when I hear somebody say, you know, they've got to really just be uneducated, they've got to be stupid, what do I say? Do I engage with that? And so that's what the depolarizing within is about. Because basically, what I would say is, you know, I thought that too. And sometimes I think that, even now. And yet, I have to share with you that I have seen highly educated people. They are not stupid that have these thoughts. And on and on. It isn't just about education. They're racist, right? They're, well, you name it. They don't care. They're cold-hearted, and so on. They're not all. They're not all like that. Another workshop is families and politics. I don't know how many of you, but I talk to almost everybody I know who has a sister or a cousin or a brother or a father or a mother or a son or a daughter who is a Trump voter. And what do you do at Thanksgiving, or what do you do anytime that once we're allowed to get together again, or when you talk to them online? Do you talk about it? Is it just like the proverbial elephant in the room? And they have really good strategies for doing this kind of work. The classic workshop is the red-blue workshop, where they have people examine the stereotypes that they believe the other side has of them and the stereotypes they hold of the other people. And then reds and blues share that with each other. It's a very interesting format. And I have seen, pretty amazing, again, affect shifts from that. And I want to share with you a video of, if I can, I'm going to share screen again and show you. This one's about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to open it up.
This part of Ohio is southwestern Ohio, and it's in between the metro area of Cincinnati and Dayton. So there's a lot of rural and suburban areas, depending on what part of the county you're in. Factories have been closing down left and right. So I've seen a lot of forced retirements, a lot of forced layoffs. Once some people get through the layoffs, sometimes they are able to come back. A lot of times they weren't. I've had the door slammed in my face. I've had people say very rude things about Obama and ask if I voted for him. And some people would say, hey, you're not going to lie to me. Go ahead and put your sign in the yard. And other people would say, get out of here because you're a Democrat.
I love Donald Trump. A lot of people don't. And I think it's not his personality. He's a man that has given his life for his country, if you think about it. And that's why I love him. But the biggest challenge is getting that sort of a message across of who he really is.
In my opinion, if you voted for Trump, then you're taking on all of the things that he and his supporters are for. And I think you're racist, and I don't want to be involved in that.
Sometimes to speak to an atheist or a person that's not conservative, have the same beliefs as me, a person of a different color. It's sometimes I want to talk to them, but I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you. Right now, I kind of feel afraid to open my mouth.
I'm afraid that if this vitriol and this animosity continues to grow, it might give certain groups a blanket check to touch upon violence.
There are nice people who do nice things. And I don't know how we get back to that.
What you just saw were excerpts from interviews done prior to a 3-day gathering of 7 Republicans and 8 Democrats in the small Rust Belt town of Lebanon, Ohio. Their comments revealed their anxieties and concerns about their coming meeting with folks who voted differently from them. After 2.5 days of skillfully guided and very dynamic exchanges, a group statement was read by David Blankenhorn, one of the leaders of the gathering, that summarized what had taken place.
We are 15 residents of Southwest Ohio. Politically, 7 of us are conservative in our philosophy, typically voting for Republican over Democratic candidates and supportive of President Donald Trump and his administration, while 8 of us are liberal in our philosophy, typically voting for Democratic over Republican candidates and critical of President Trump and his administration. A number of us on both sides began our meeting believing that the other side could not be dealt with on the basis of rational thought. We say unanimously that our experience of talking with rather than simply at or about each other caused us to abandon that belief.
After the meeting was over, this is what the participants had to say about what they experienced.
The way this weekend affected me is I showed emotions I kept hidden for a long time. This is the first time I've cried in a couple of years, actually. So it brought some emotions out of me that I was afraid to show.
I did end up liking them as people, and even the one that came in and was saying he's arch conservative and Trump is his guy. We joked, and it was a genuine laugh that we had with each other. And so I think talking really is not underrated.
If more people will have this experience, I think maybe our country could come back together and pull together as one and learn to share and understand it's okay to have opposing ideas. It's okay to be different. We are still human. We still love one another.
It smashes a lot of the stereotype of what one group or another group is supposed to be.
And I have permission to call him my Muslim friend, okay? Because we are friends. So anyway, we're going to lay the groundwork, he and I, and we're going to lay the groundwork. And one thing that we're going to do, representing what we just came from, is he's going to attend a church with me, a Christian church. And I'm going to go visit a mosque with him. And we're going to see what each other are doing.
Nice.
We talked to people this weekend. I was very, very impressed with the dynamics of that. And if you did 20,000 of these across the nation, you would change the world. I truly believe that, because people are talking to people.
America has been around for a couple of 100 years or so, even more. And these challenges at some form always existed, and American people have always been able to solve these problems. And I mean, this is not, we are going into an uncharted territory. This is not our first presidential election. This is not our first controversial campaign.
This thing should go on and on and on. This what we just did this weekend should not stop. This should go on to the next county, to the next state, to the city, and back out into the country and down every highway.
So if you were kind of like me, when you first saw some of those Republicans say what they said, you might have felt that I could never, ever talk and have a relationship with that person. Yet these other folks who went through the experience with them changed that position. So I just want to conclude my part, and I realize I went a little bit longer than I thought I would. I always do. Sorry. one poem, interestingly, somebody gave me this a while ago, this book, and just the other night, I finally picked it up. You know, it was on my stack of books that we all have, most of us have, and it turned out to be an amazing poetry book. It's called Limitless by Donna Falls. And this poem was the first one that I opened up to. And it says, always into love. On this voyage of the soul, may we be bridge builders, our common ground visible beneath the surface differences. May we braid the threads of reconciliation into a chain of possibility that joins, heals, and includes what once seemed separate. May our shared prayer be answered, to grow so open that there is no them or us, only the one, moving always into love. So again, thank you for coming. There's a tremendous amount more to be said, but I want to now open up to questions. Just unmute yourself and go for it, rather than do a hand raising thing.
This is Alan. Hi.
Yeah.
Is that all right? All right to jump in. So, you know, I don't think of myself as a cynical person, but I have a cynical question.
Sure.
Because I have 3 people in my life who are Trump supporters who I get along with beautifully, and we respect each other's feelings. We have great dialogues about our differences and how we view the world and why we've come to believe certain things. But I don't know, how does that translate into those people not voting at some point against the best interests of society, which is what happened in 2016. I mean, I am all for getting together and breaking down those barriers. But I guess in terms of the bigger picture, I want us to all get along in that sense, but then how does that translate into us thinking about what's best for all people in this country and coming to a way that we can achieve that as from our respective differences?
Right.
And how does Braver Angels, what's their thinking along those lines?
Well, I can't speak for Braver Angels on that. I have heard some thoughts there, because Braver Angels itself has got a diverse number of people in its organization. My thinking is, Alan, you're doing it. You're doing a great job. If you're able to have those kinds of relationships, you're essentially, at least with those people, doing what Braver Angels speaks to, which is to be able to have respectful conversations and without animosity and with respect. I think over time that does heal and create change. I'm a strong believer that we still need a progressive political movement. And that's what I think will bring about political change if in fact at the same time we take into consideration our ability to talk to other people without demeaning them, without making them feel less than, without making them feel disrespected. And it sounds like you're doing that. So both fronts are important. It's just like I've been involved in dialogue groups between Jews and Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Muslims and Arabs. And it's not going to solve the whole problem, but it's one vital part of the problem solving. That's my take on it. I think in the Braver Angels community, they do find that people are literally changing their viewpoints about some things.
I'd like to just respond to that, Alan, and people. The progressive movement has to include a whole new change in the electoral process. How many times have we gone through the election with people calling each other phonies, downing each other, rather than saying, I am for, I want this office because the whole toxic environment of our electoral system definitely has to change. It begins there. Because if you're going to be a person who is defaming other people, hopefully you're not going to vote for that person. You're going to respect yourself and you're going to respect the other and state your values strongly so that you're not destroying the other. That's what basically is upsetting me and why I want the political system to change.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, Alan, hi.
Yeah, Carl.
Well, sort of like the gentleman said about race, is a kind of a construct put on us by those that want to see a difference. But this is even worse because we're talking about polarization. And what's missing here in our political system are frankly more fronts, more colors. Like you said, green. I mean, it seems to me that when Washington said, beware the two-party system, we never took heed to that. And somehow or another, Braver Angels takes a look at the problem as polarities. I'm feeling personally like more in the middle. I support the progressive campaign, but I never identified with Democrats. I voted against Trump, not so much for Biden. So when I think about it, it seems to me what's missing is the middle, and the motivation of those people to have rational thought ought to be expanded. That was my take on it.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, like I said, the Braver Angels mission is not, involves that to some extent in the sense that they have debates that are available to be watched. You can go to their website. They have it on a bunch of different subjects. They have national debates. Sometimes the local groups have debates. And the debates are organized in such a way that they're not aimed at any kind of hostility or projection on the individual. They're just to positively advocate for their position on their side. And sometimes people are moved to a different sort of position. But their primary mission, again, is to shift the attitude with which we hold other people. And if you're already there, then that's great. That's really great. You might want to just check into them to see how you can help other people.
I do. And what I wanted to say is attitude is one way to say it, but it seems to me temperament, this idea of toxicity is elevated no matter where you're coming from. And that's what we have to dampen down, this get the temperament. And by the way, meditation helps with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for those of you that don't know, I do a webinar every Monday night called Staying Sane While Making the World Better. And in a way, it has very similar themes, but it takes it to a more spiritual, psychological level. Anyone else? Questions?
I wanted to say that in 2007, I became a county legislator from the perspective of a progressive social democrat type person. And, so here are all these Republicans that I'm working with and are against it actually. And I found myself and I immediately signed up with Alan Levin for personal therapy and also like just coaching, like how to be in this position and maintain some integrity. And goodness. And I did develop relationships with these Republicans, and some of them extremely conservative, but they did become friends and over time. And I was able to work through that. I do find it much harder, and I've worked with Alan on this and want to sign up with Braver Angels with my sister and her family who voted for Trump and were Trump supporters. And I am working hard on that. So just wanted to talk about like the difference with families, and how hard that is.
Yeah.
Alan, I have a question. Can you talk to me about how you've engaged with Braver Angels? Have there been webinars like this?
Yeah, everything's been online because I got involved with them during COVID. You know, they started in 2016. So like the workshop that you saw the video of was of course live. And sometimes they would do it evidently over the course of a weekend, like 2 whole days. And people would have meals together and they would get to know each other. They tell their stories about their personal lives and what they're involved with. So they get to see the multidimensional person that they had previously held stereotypically in a kind of a box as Trump supporter, racist, fascist, you know, whatever we throw on that. And my experience has been with hour-long or 2-hour-long workshops as both a participant and sometimes as an observer, because they have so many people sometimes seeking to be parts of these things that they just backlog it and they don't want to have too many people participating in the dialogues because it would get too confusing. So they have the workshop, they have an equal number of blues and an equal number of reds, self-identified. And of course, some people will say, well, I lean red, but I really think I'm a purple, you know, that kind of a thing. And they have these facilitated conversations and like fishbowl experiences, and then they divide them up and they have one-to-one discussions. Another thing they actually have available, and I'll explain this a little bit, is one-to-one. You can sign up on their website to meet with somebody. If you live in if you identify as an urbanite, you can meet with a rural person, or a Black person with a white person with a Black person, obviously a Republican with a Democrat, and get to have a personal relationship conversation. And again, they do structure these conversations. They use communication and therapeutic skills and methods they don't just throw people in and say, okay, get to know each other, have a conversation, get to know each other. It's careful and it's skillful. So I've participated in those things. They do tend to have, and we all might understand why this would be so, or more blues wanting to participate than they do reds. But that's not to say that there are no reds. There are a lot. And the leadership, they insist on being both, being equally paired, and even their funding sources, they say, and I think they're very transparent about where they come from individual donations, but they're also from foundations, and they try to keep it so that the foundations are equally those that tend to support liberal causes and those that tend to support conservative causes. But again, my own experience, Frank, is based on participation and observation and reading and listening to their accounts online.
Can I? Okay. I want to say this. I'm from Ohio, not Lebanon, but somewhere in the middle of the state. I grew up there. But I've been in the New York area for most of my life anyway. My best friend is a staunch Republican. Before the first time he ran, she said to me, I can't stand that man. She knew what was repulsive about him and awful. She went into the voting booth and she was going to vote for the guy up in North Paul. I don't know, she was going to vote for another Republican just to say she voted Republican. She didn't. She said, my mom and dad, I got in the voting booth and my mom and dad would have said to me, what are you doing? You vote for Trump, you know. So she did. This time around, she said, Mayor, I'm voting for Trump easily. But I want to say this. She and I both live over in this part of the country now. We are still best friends. So we certainly know how to be good friends. We certainly don't need that. But it is amazing to me that we're both still completely at our ends of the poll in voting. And so I'm more interested in getting a few people like my friend to think that there's something okay about the Democrats. I was hoping Biden might be the one who could start that kind of, by helping in areas of the country where they're staunch. And I heard Connie say that she and her sister digress. And I was thinking, how did that happen? Because they grew up in the same atmosphere, the same home. I mean, I grew up in such a democratic atmosphere. You've got a sister, Connie, who it didn't happen that way.
Connie, you're muted.
Yeah, we grew up in Texas where we with Republican parents, and I was fortunate when to leave Texas as a very young woman and be around some incredible people who I would say really spoke with me in the way that the Braver Angels model, with such respect and regard, even though she was the most radical person I'd ever been around.
Your sister?
No,
Oh.
no, I was exposed to a woman in Maryland who was this progressive Vista volunteer type person. And she really helped me by using the Braver Angels model. I can see it now.
Yeah.
And it's
this brings up something, thanks Connie, that I've observed as well. The people who have reported changing their whole worldview from extreme right or hardcore Republican to more liberal and progressive causes did so because of personal relationships with people on, quote, the other side, who cared for them, who had kindness in their heart, and who spoke to them respectfully. And there are several accounts of, like, for example, right-wing neo-Nazi young people who became liberated in their minds from that and now work to help other people get through that, who talk about having met some Jewish guy or some person who, represented to them the other and the enemy, and the person was just nice to them and kind to them and knew who they were and knew what was going on, and they changed. And so again, in answer to Alan Berger's original question about can this have any effect on the political dynamics in the country, I think it can. In the long range, I think it's a part of that. And yet, we need to persevere in our efforts to, in a positive framework, promote policies that will alleviate suffering and increase human kindness and compassion in the world.
Alan,
yeah.
Before I have to go, because I'm just in the interest of time, I just wanted to ask you though, did you have a vision of us trying to do this in Rockland County and getting some groups of people together and process these kinds of things?
You want to do that? I've
thought about it.
Okay.
I mean,
anybody that's interested can contact me. We need to find some Republicans. To set up Braver Angels program, we need to have Republicans who.
No, I mean, there are people I know, and some of them are on Facebook, some I've met other places that I would really love to be in a room with and kind of break down who we are and find out who we are, and because I also I hear a lot of anger, on both sides, and I think it'd be really valuable. I didn't know if you were thinking that we'd be heading in that direction somehow.
The status of it right now in New York is that there's a new, what they call an alliance, which is people that are active in Braver Angels who meet together. And now, of course, they're meeting online, and they're based in Westchester. And they're certainly open to there being a Rockland group. Again, it takes time, and takes energy, it takes intention, and it takes having equal number, or at least to start with, an equal number of Republicans. And again, the way they describe red and blue is red is Republican or conservative or voted for Trump or leans in that direction, leans in. That's the idea. and the blues lean in that direction. And you could lean way over too, you know, I mean, you could be with Noam Chomsky and Che Guevara for that matter. Or you could be with Rush Limbaugh and may he rest forever in peace. And not come back.
I have to go soon too.
Yeah.
Alan?
Yeah, so I want to honor that it's a little bit after 2 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. Those of you who need to get off. As I said, I'm willing to stay on for another little, whatever it takes, and for
I would
people
just
to
like-
have a conversation.
Thanks, Alan. I would just like to make one closing statement about your observation and at the very top. And it confirmed something I found in workshops that I was doing when I divided the people up in groups based on gender. And oftentimes we make an assumption based on gender. Well, that's about as polarizing as you can get some days. But I would say this, in the groups, when I observed it, there was way more variation in opinions on anything in the groups than the group would finally come to consensus. And then I found in consensus, there wasn't that much difference between men and women. And it just reminded me of that today, as you said it. You just can't assume by their party affiliation or leaning much about that person's really, moral structure, character, or anything until you get to know them, right? That's it.
Yeah, thank you. And that's for a lot of us, that's a really hard lesson.
Yep.
A lot of us. Some of you sound like are already there, but it's been a tough one for me, and I wanted to share the part of the journey.
Peace.
Okay, so thank you. For those who are getting off, I'm going to stop the recording.